Hey, what's up YouTube? So thank you for tuning in for another episode of Killing for Company. So this is the second one I'm shooting today, so I will be out of town next week. Got my coffee here ready, my little coffee sloth ready to go. Okay, so in the background we are listening to Mystic. This is, I believe, we have a self-titled record, and this was released in 2019 off of I Hate Records. Speed metal. Really cool stuff. Dig the cover art as well. I'll turn that up a little bit. Okay. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. I've been kind of doing records I've been listening to 2020 and so on and so forth, but kind of mixing genres. I wanted to do just a short sort of condensed video, just 3 CDs I'm showing today, but all within the death metal genre. So it'll be a bit more of a singular topic in that regard. That being said, all 3 projects are sort of in different lanes within the umbrella or under the umbrella of death metal. The first one is going to be a band out of Mexico from Querétaro, and this band is called Question. Reflections of the Void. Pull this out here for you if I don't manage to drop it. And on Chaos Records, which is a Mexican label and distro, they've been putting out a lot of like represses and reissues of older stuff, but also signing and promoting younger bands. So Question, this is their second full length. And they play a style of death metal that's, to call it progressive, I think maybe a little bit misleading. It's like what I would call mid-era death. So from spiritual healing to individual thought patterns, death metal. It's, you could even say a little bit of immolation, in the sense that the records are difficult to, or the songs are a little bit complicated or awkward in terms of the structure, which has always been a calling card for me in terms of immolation. So if you were looking for something like Cenotaph, I'd say you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed, but there's just a very different, a bit more rooted in like American death metal sound. The artwork there is super cool. I don't know if, we'll see if the focus works on that at all, but artwork here done by Lucas Corte, and the production value also sort of stands out to me. It's, I don't want to say like porous, but it just is one of those examples where you realize so many of the bands that are doing death metal right now, especially in like inspired by bands, you know, from the 90s, how much, you know, have been, I mean, I would say I at least have been informed by like a certain kind of sound or production focus that when I heard this, it just sounded a little bit empty, or dry. It's not to say that it's poorly produced by any means. It'll just stand out by comparison to a lot of the bands that you're hearing on like 20 Buck Spin or Dark Descent. But cool death metal, they've got like instrumental passages, so that you hear that sort of progressive influence here. There's even I believe they did an entire song, Alone with Everybody, which is a Charles Bukowski poem. So I don't know, they just borrowed his poetry and put it to a death metal song. If that gives you any indication of how cerebral this band, I guess, is. But definitely, one of those records I thought I would see circulating more. I think this will sort of put them, this record specifically, will put them a little bit more on the American death metal scene, if not the international scene. And I look forward to see what they offer next. If it's a little bit, like I said, that production value, it's kind of like, if you're into Horrendous, I would say it's dialed back and not quite as proggy as some of their more recent, Horrendous's more recent material, but in a little bit in that vein. So that was Question. Next up, this is Aura with Jurisprudence, a band out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and moving from a bit more of a progressive death metal band, this is a little bit more technical. So that transition for me just has to do with the tone of the record and less influence on like necessarily like the instrumental passages. Technical death metal to me, you transition a bit more to the New York scene specifically. So while Immolation shares some crossover between these two bands, this band's also looking to, Suffocation, and I would even say a little bit of the Swedish technical scene. So Anatta and early Spawn of Possession are other influences here. What makes this also stand out, moving from like a production value with the Question album that was sort of dry or coarse, this also does not sound like a lot of technical death metal today. The members have various other projects within the Wisconsin scene. So they play in like black metal and other death metal and sludge and post-metal bands. And that definitely contributes, I think, to the sound of the rhythm section here. It's large and aggressive for sure, but it definitely benefits from not having like an incredibly well compressed sound. It does sound modern, but it's like a wall of steel wool. If I had to pick out like a metaphor here, the sense that it's grating, but it's not so dense to the point where it's like a well compressed sound. So I know that's kind of a obtuse way to describe it, but you don't get a lot of like well defined edges that you get in a lot of production values from modern technical death metal bands. It was a breath of fresh air. It's not quite as brutal as something like Defeated Sanity that came out with a great record this year. That band is sort of operating in a tier on its own, and it did get a lot of recognition, and probably deservedly so. This is definitely a step down in terms of the kind of instrumentation going on here. It's not quite that like Mahavishnu orchestra through a garbage disposal that Defeated Sanity is. This is definitely more rooted in the rhythm section, trying to make complex riffs and then stacking them against one another. It's not a lot of like the individual splintering around and doing these really complex leads, as much as it is that like strange geometry. There's a whole bunch of this record that is difficult to penetrate just because of the consistent tension in dynamics. But it brought me back over and over and over. Initially, it was just the tenor of that record. The guitar tone was unique by comparison to a lot of modern technical death metal records, but then just the complexity of it how often I had to sort of go back and re-listen to the record just to keep track of all the different riffs that they were putting against one another, which has always been the appeal for technical death metal to me. You had to nail the sound in order to sort of get a pass, but once I was willing to sort of play the game, okay, you sound like I want you to sound, but how well the song's written and how much complexity can you offer, that this band gets it. They definitely speak to the where I'm looking, or what I'm looking for from technical death metal bands in the 21st century. So really cool listen, an independent release. So if I think they still have available CDs on Bandcamp. I think upcoming here, first week of February, you get a Bandcamp Friday, first one of 2021. If you want to pick it up, go and support the band on independent release, and there you go. So, Aura Jurisprudence. Last one here, we're moving from a more established technical death metal band to a brutal death metal act. This is Decayed Flesh. They're out of Indonesia, which for anyone probably watching this channel, you know that Indonesia has an incredibly well-established brutal death metal scene. The album here is called, I believe, Eternal Misery. Get my notes here. So it's the first full length from them on Brutal Mind, which has a whole lot of great Indonesian brutal death metal to their name. That's kind of their deal. But Decayed Flesh, they still have, we moved from Aura there, right? So now we've introduced a little bit of Suffocation. They're playing in that style for sure. I saw a lot of people comparing them also to Inveracity out of Greece, which is absolutely true as well. It's interesting though, Indonesia, so like Decayed released is an Indonesian brutal death metal band. Their first full length comes out in 2001. This is 2020, so while I think there's definitely credit, it's worth your time to be praising early brutal death metal, technical brutal death metal bands out of America or the international scene. Indonesia, I think, has earned their place. That I'm don't know this for sure, but I'd be absolutely at peace with saying that Decayed Flesh would have plenty of influences just coming from Indonesia to contribute to their sound. Other early bands from the 2000s like Asphyxiate and Bleeding Corpse come to mind as influences on this record in the same way that Suffocation and Inveracity could. It's got in terms of its production value, it's just as rooted in that Suffocation sound. There's not a lot of the slam dynamics here, so I appreciate that because I'm not a huge slam fan. I usually don't gravitate towards that kind of music, so Decayed Flesh spoke to me just because they were walking that line between modern brutality, technical elements, and a approach to production values that spoke to sort of that mid-90s where you don't get that incredibly cranked high-end snare drum. The drums here sound a little bit more organic. You have lows and highs in the vocal range, and the rhythm section is everything that you know and love about brutal death metal. So out of all the brutal death metal bands I've heard this year, this may be my favorite brutal death metal release out of 2020. So that's all I got for you here today, just a short sort of condensed death metal specific video. I will link to the bands in the description, and thank you for watching another episode of Killing for Company. See you next time.